What's up, everybody? Americana back here with another video. The Fed is cutting rates again, and it could trigger the final pump in crypto before a full-blown bear market. After $20 billion in liquidations and altcoins nuking over 90%, investors are missing what this really means for the macro. So let's get into the video. All right, everybody. We are at somewhat of an interesting point where the market has been so nasty, crypto's been so brutal that I have not seen anybody talk about rate cuts, even though they are less than 10 days away, or exactly 10 days away from here. I've seen nobody talk about rate cuts. I've seen people show this, Fed chart pointing to the fact that we are likely to get cuts, but have not seen anybody themselves talk about rate cuts yet. So quick recap here. I don't know if you guys have been around long enough to have seen when I was talking about this in videos, but I'm in the camp that these true cutting cycles, these reversals of policy, these going from QT to QE typically is not the bullish signal that most investors think. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being the Fed. I mean, they really only take action when they absolutely need to. You can see all through here, no action is really taken. And then it's kind of like, holy shit, like we have to cut, guys. Like, what did we do to the market? Things have gotten so overheated. This is 2001 in here. You guys know what happened. This is 2008. You guys know what happened. And then this is pre-COVID. In here, you guys know what happened. A little bit of a more fundamental crash with the world shutting down and things like that. But if you think the Fed didn't have insight to what policy was going to be around COVID, then you have lost your mind. But typically, like I said, not the, extremely bullish euphoric thing that people typically think. You don't just get, the Fed doesn't, just basically signal that they're going to cut rates and investors get to just print money for the next however long the rate cut cycle is. It's never that simple, and we can see it on chart here. Fed started fully reversing policy after increasing rates, right? Full pivot on policy, bear market sets in. 2007, 2008, full pivot on policy, a little bit of an exit pump, bear market sets in. Exit pump, bear market sets in, potentially in kind of the exit pump era here before some macro bear market sets in. Sorry, excuse me. But we haven't, we did have somewhat of a pause in here. It looks, with the cut in September and with a cut coming in October, it looks to be that we will kind of continue lower. And if this is like the real pivot in policy where we are going to continually cut after this, I would expect something like this to show up. But that is not the worst thing for crypto. There's a little bit of nuance with this. When we look at the stock market versus when we look at crypto, when we look at where gold's at and things like that, there is some catching up that needs to be done. And these markets do not end, or bull markets do not end in despair. Currently, crypto is in despair. Even the stock market in extreme fear after only like a 2% pullback from all-time high. So this is not how markets typically end. Just like with cycle timing and 4-year cycles and things like that, and I was not in the camp of a longer cycle, I'm somewhat in that same position now where I have to have this lens of, guys, we are in the final phase, but final phases don't end without euphoria. So I am fully mentally within, I'm operating as if these rate cuts are overall bearish for the market, but with the understanding that we are going to likely see an exit pump in euphoria before then. If we saw euphoria all throughout here in the market leading up to this next rate cut in 10 days, I might be, screaming, a little bit more aggressively to the downside. But we have not had those kind of exit pumps that we typically see. We still see alt season dynamics in the background of crypto, and with alt season comes that euphoria that I'm talking about. So as soon as that euphoria does enter, I'm exiting this market. I'm scaling out. I'm getting out, because I have the understanding that we are typically on the last little legs of any appreciation in the market before a more macro bear market does set in. And that's in all indices. That's across all assets. That's gold, that's stocks, and that is Bitcoin and crypto. All right, so we also had a cut last month, September 17th, right, on a Wednesday as usual. And what has happened since that last cut? I'm not gonna lie to you guys. You guys know I will never lie to you guys. I was in the camp that this was going to be a sell the news event, but I did not get it. Even with that, I did not get it entirely right. Okay, to me, sell the news event, all right, was only going to come in if we were very euphoric going into it. So if Bitcoin was up here, right, maybe even a little bit higher, and total two was, breaking out or had already kind of broken out, I was going to be screaming that this was a sell the news event so we could get some sort of back test, right, on Bitcoin or some sort of back test on total two to confirm the breakout. Okay, and because we did not get breakouts in Bitcoin or even total two beforehand, I kind of backed off that statement. All right, so I'm not gonna lie, I did for the most part back off that statement entirely just because we didn't get really the pump into it to see the sell a news event. But the sell the news event came nonetheless with an 8% decline in Bitcoin. So we got that one right, wrong. I would call it wrong. If you guys want to be nice and say, no, your base case was still right. I did come off of it. And since then, what have we had? We've had some macro headwinds in here with some data prints and things like that. Then we had Trump tariff kind of tantrum that he threw with China, obviously leading to a massive wipe. That's our $20 billion in liquidations coming in there. So not only did we have a sell the news event and then run up, but we've had some macro headwinds since then, and I think that's kind of caused people to lose sight of the fact that a cut is absolutely right around the corner. A cut will happen on Wednesday, October 29th. So the cut will happen right in here. What happens before then is going to, I think, kind of point to similarly from last time what we get when it comes to a sell the news event. I'm not going to say that it's not priced in because that's kind of ignorant. Everything is really always priced in. But at the very least, I haven't seen people talking about rate cuts in the same way they were talking about them in here, which I think is a bullish thing, which I think makes it less of a kind of sell the news event. All right, especially if we just waddle down here and we get a rate cut, okay, I don't expect more downside to come after that. So that technically kind of wouldn't be sell the news event. Using the same logic that did get me in trouble last time, I'm not gonna lie. But overall cut to cut to cut, I'm a little bit unbothered currently, and I'm more so looking for something like this to come in. Sentiment is in the dumps right now. Sentiment was not in the dumps here, or even here, even though we didn't get an exit pump. So until sentiment, right, if we get another cut here and we break out here and Bitcoin goes to 150K and altcoin market expands and Ethereum is at $10, $11, $12,000, I will be screaming, guys, the top is very, 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 very near, right, at that point in time. So we have the cuts. We have the understanding that when these rate cuts come in, it typically signals that something actually might be broken on the back end, and the Fed is trying to prop things up for a little bit, but also with the understanding that from a sentiment perspective, these markets, these all-time highs, don't end in fear and in euphoria, especially with total two still what I would consider somewhat on the verge of a breakout, at least at or near, its 4-year highs. That is a great way to get euphoria in the market, is to get things like altcoins to break out and suck in a bunch of retail investors who think, hey, oh my gosh, altcoins are just now heating up. Ethereum's at 12K, people are calling for 20, and look at all these meme coins I can buy. Meanwhile, Fed is cutting, stock market's getting euphoric, and this is inbound. So kind of a little bit of a nuance, not as clean, I guess, as I thought it would be, as we have been talking about this really for the entirety of this channel, as rate cuts were kind of always on the table or something that people were looking forward to. But I did want to bring it up again. I did want to discuss it again for a couple different reasons. One being we haven't got the euphoric exit pump to really make me super, super, super worried. We haven't gotten the full pivot, which I am curious to hear his speech, if he signals to potentially some more cutting at the next meeting or things like that. So we haven't gotten the pivot, and then we haven't got that euphoric kind of moment in the market. But when those things show up, I will be ready to sell. All right, finger on the red button. And you guys have seen this chart a lot, but we'll show it again here. 99% chance that we get a 25 basis point cut, with a 1% chance that we get a 50 basis point cut. I never like to theorize over something that only has a 1% chance, but if this happened, obviously the market, that's not going to be a sell the news event. That is going to be extremely bullish because the market has not priced in a 50 basis point cut. If we do get something like that, maybe we kind of instantly go into this euphoric phase that I'm talking about, and we start talking about tops coming in and things like that. Don't get it twisted. We are very, very close to the top from a timing perspective, but sentiment has not gotten there yet. These things can change super, super fast, right? We could have Ethereum over $5,000 within a week, right? These things can change on a dime. Again, not betting on there being a 1%, or not betting on there being a 50 basis point cut, but just kind of something interesting to look at as we are at these range lows, and kind of don't really expect sell the news event unless something happens in the next week and we kind of get back to these highs. Could see, a pullback into here post cut, something like that. But just kind of keep an eye out for it. You guys, I have time to make more videos. I'll get another one out on the rate cut next week, as I will get those out on Monday, and we'll get the rate cut that week. So we'll have a little bit more price data to look at in the meantime. But that's kind of it for this video. Just what I'm looking at. I thought it was interesting. I haven't seen anybody talk about rate cuts in a while, even in my comment section. So when things like that happen, that's typically the stuff that I like to bring up, because it means people aren't thinking about it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let's find a bottom. Long 2 weeks. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed my videos, found some solace and some help in there. But if you guys ever have questions, make sure you drop it in the comments. I can always take the time to help you guys out. In addition to that, I appreciate the support, subscribers, comments, things like that. Make sure you guys keep firing away on that side. Other thing too, you can share my channel too. If you guys have friends, if you're in crypto, you likely have friends in crypto. If you found my channel or content enjoyable, I would ask, if you guys can share with people, share with friends, things like that. But we'll wrap it up here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.